This year, our theme is Igbo fusions, past, present, and futures. The theme was inspired, actually, at last year's conference. We had one of our keynote speakers, Nedia Korfo, who was speaking about her experience as an Igbo American, or a Niger American, as she calls herself, and often not feeling Igbo enough, often being told that she's not Igbo enough. So it got us thinking about what does it mean to be Igbo, particularly thinking about the fact that we're here in the UK, with different influences, thinking about Igbo in digital spaces as well. So this conference really gives us a chance to think about what does it mean to be Igbo in our sort of contemporary setting, but also what kinds of fusions are taking place, how is Igbo influencing other cultures, and how is Igbo culture being influenced by other cultures, and even within Igbo culture, when we speak about Igbo culture, what are we actually referring to, because it's such a broad and diverse culture language. So those are some of the things that we'll be touching upon over the next 2 days.
The boy looked at him, and he knew the first question was coming. He had that look in his eyes. He had probably woken up the night before and been challenged by an existential question and wanted an answer. The boy cleared his throat. Here it came, the question. How do we know we are Igbo? He thought about the answer. His practice was never to reply immediately, but to think about the idea and take his time before the answer came. He chewed his cola nut from the night before and winced a little at the bitter taste. In his head, he knew elements of the answer to the boy's question. It is obvious that the Igbo are the people who think themselves Igbo, and he and his family had been a huge part of getting that to happen. 1,000 years ago, the people here were living like beasts in the forest, and even more recently, when the bulk of them had turned to agriculture and producing a surplus, which had enabled a degree of luxury, sophisticated knowledge, and high material culture, there remained other Igbo-speaking peoples on the border who, for whatever reason, did not accept that they were Igbo. Today, when long-distance traders pass through these Igbo-speaking communities, they are treated as hostile strangers. Iri's lineage and his allies, the Smiths and medicine men, the Dibia, were the only ones able to walk through these Igbo-speaking areas, passing through all the different clans, because of their ritual role in counting the months in anticipation of the first rains for planting. Nri knew exactly what he would tell the boy. Some think that Igbo-ness is about the clothes we wear, but 500 years ago, Igbos did not dress as we do today. So it's not the clothes that make us Igbo. Similarly, those Igbos that did not worship exactly the way that we do today, we know the sun and the land are the powers. Then they worship women and the moon. So it's not religion, although the religion is very important. The language must be important because we're named after the language, and the language carries our spirit. But I would say that even the people who were here before us, who did not dress like us or worship the way we do, or even speak this language as we speak it today, nevertheless, are we not their children? So it must be more than the language.
And to say to you that your culture, or our culture, my Igbo culture, has a very deep and profound impact on Pan-African identity and on global identities in general, and what people call the African Renaissance, but which I believe is the kernel of the global Renaissance. And we can argue about that. But I think the world is going through a transformation that will require something that we've seen through the germ or gem of what has emerged from such work as Chinua Achebe's work, which Things Fall Apart, for example, is translated into over 60 million copies and over 60 languages last time I checked. So it's widely read, and it's touching very, very many lives. So it's not sitting somewhere in Umofia or somewhere in Enugu. It's traveled the world. And we cannot therefore claim that it's specific. Although its roots are there, it belongs to the world.
What I found really interesting is just looking at the way food is changing, even within Nigeria. So, these traditional weddings now, the Igbo traditional weddings, they're making very exotic cakes with, depicting traditional scenes. I'm not a cake maker anyway, so maybe that's why I find them very impressive. And then the other thing I found quite interesting in part of the research I've been doing is just, I'm always very interested in connections between various cuisines and how food transcends different communities. Like even within Nigeria, for example, when I was writing the ethic book, it turned out that actually one of the most famous ethics soups, afang, is actually an Igbo soup. So when I was told this, I thought, no, this can't be true. So I asked, they said, yeah, it's your soup. We took it, but we made it better. So I asked the Obong of Calabar, who I happened to, I was lucky that I was introduced to him. So I said, I can't write this thing down before the ethic people kill me if it's a lie. He said, no, we did. He said, it's Okazi soup, but our own is better than yours. I was like, oh, wow, okay.
There is an important distinction between ethnic fiction and ethnography. We must acknowledge the veracity of the insider novelist's insight. Yet at the same time, a novelist voices her understanding differently from a historian, an economist, a political scientist, social scientist, folklorist, or an ethnographer, such as me. A novel is a work of art, and the artist may take more artistic liberties than permissible for a social scientist or an ethnographer. A novel must not be taken literally. Instead, we may read it carefully to distinguish between fictitious characters and events on the one hand, and the general cultural background on the other. Furthermore, ethnic fiction may contain a meta-text critical of the author's own culture, as illustrated by Flora Nwapa. Flora Nwapa's statements on the childlessness of Oguta's lake goddess are one example of the author's insider's critique of her own people's obsession with female fecundity. While deeply steeped in her own ethnicity, the novelist had her own agenda.
Well, I think sin refers to some kind of crime or offense to God, okay? And in the Igbo Bibles, we have mehie and njo. I think every other Bible used mehie. The Catholics used njo. They have to be different, of course. Now, I ask the question, what happened to nso? Because in the real sense of it, I think nso is actually the apt Igbo cultural equivalent of sin. Because an nso is actually a crime against a deity, an offense against a deity. Nsani, an offense against the land or the earth goddess, and so on. So I investigated all the different instances or contexts where nso is used, and I observed that it always has something to do with a deity. So that's why I insist that nso is actually the apt or the best cultural equivalent for sin. But nso has already been given a different function. Holiness, which means hidden nso. And so what happened to nso? Its meaning was kind of extended. Since it has something to do with deities, you can also ascribe this status of sacred to it. So from sacrilegious to sacred, and from sacred to holy. So we can see the kind of evolution of the word nso. So today we talk about nso as if it has always meant holy. This, in my view, is a Christian creation.
Here, the video is trying to reproduce the kinds of privilege restrictions that exist in the original cultural context of the masquerade. But surely such a thing is not at all possible in an era of camera phones and the World Wide Web. Masquerades are tied to the performative remembrance of ancestors, of a community's past deeds and achievements. They retain instruction and comment on individuals and communities within society, and they reflect cosmological beliefs. The knowledge or secrets of the masquerade are not always open or available to everyone. Some ceremonies and masquerades are specifically for the initiated, others are gender-specific, some are not to be viewed by those outside the community. It's not possible to truly know the intention of why the video recorder placed this caution or restriction on the title. He could simply be repeating what he had been told. It could be because he was under the impression that women viewing this video will be met with some unknown misfortune, and so he was offering a kind word of warning. Regardless, if part of the cultural power of the masquerade is its mystique and restriction, does the contemporary digital age signal the end of this practice, or does the new medium present the spirits of the masquerade with a new playing field and a new global audience, along with new rules to accommodate this new context?
Did you imagine that people would react the way they have reacted? Because I know when you first of all posted the picture or the video when you got your first copy and it just kind of went crazy, did you think it would be that greatly received by everyone?
Not at all. It was a complete shock because prior to that, I had approached the big publishers, Heinemann, the big Pearson, and they all said Evans Brothers, Longman, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, we're not publishing. We can't publish that." Some said, "Oh, they're doing something like that." Some said, "Oh, sorry, it's not in our." And for example, Pearson is in Nigeria, but they don't have any Nigerian language dictionary. And I find that a bit odd. And there's this movement going on for African languages, and any savvy publisher should go into languages now. So I decided, okay, I'll do it myself. Because I have internet marketing skills anyway. I was trained in internet marketing, lectured for 5 years in internet marketing, and I said, I can do this. So I uploaded it, got the copy, the draft copy from Amazon.